Imagine you're a foot soldier in 1314, standing in a muddy Scottish field, outnumbered nearly 3-1 by the most powerful army in Europe. Your king is on horseback ahead of you, and suddenly an English knight in full armor charges straight at him. What happens in the next 60 seconds will determine whether Scotland remains a free nation or becomes just another English possession. And truth, may what unfolds is the stuff of absolute legend. Let me take you back to the 23rd of June, 1314. The air is thick with tension, and two massive armies are preparing for what will become the defining moment of the wars of Scottish independence. This isn't just any old battle, this is the showdown that will either secure Scotland as freedom or crush it forever. And here's the kicker. The Scottish are massively outnumbered, outgunned, and by all logic, they shouldn't stand a chance. But sometimes, brilliance and bravery trump raw numbers. Stick with me, because this story is an absolute roller coaster. Right, let's wind back the clock a bit so you understand how we got here. The Wars of Scottish Independence kicked off back in 1296 when England, under King Edward I, nicknamed the Hammer of the Scots. And believe me, he earned that title, invaded Scotland. The English absolutely battered the Scots at the Battle of Falkirk. And by 1304, Scotland was essentially conquered. Game over. Right, not Keith. Not Keith. In 1306, Robert Bruce, yes, that's his actual name, not some superhero alias, seized the Scottish throne and reopened the war. Now, here's where it gets interesting. The following year, Edward I and his son, Edward II, took the crown. Unlike his father, who was a military genius and ruthless conqueror, Edward II was young, inexperienced, and frankly, not cut out for the job. The English position in Scotland started crumbling almost immediately. Fast forward to 1313. Robert the Bruce, now firmly established as Scotland's king, starts playing hardball. He issues an ultimatum to everyone still loyal to the old Scottish king who'd been deposed. Pledge allegiance to me or lose your lands. Simply as that, but he doesn't stop there. He demands the surrender of Stirling Castle, one of the most strategically important fortresses in Scotland. Why? Because whoever controls Stirling controls the route north into the Scottish Highlands. It's like holding the key to the entire country. A year later, Robert's younger brother, Edward Bruce Clearly, keeping it in the family, besieges Stirling Castle. The English garrison is holding on by its fingernails, and Edward II knows he can't ignore this challenge. If Stirling falls, English authority in Scotland collapses completely. So Edward musters the largest army England has ever sent into Scotland. We're talking roughly 20,000 men. Knights in gleaming armor, deadly longbowmen who can pierce armor from 200 yards away, men-at-arms, and about 2,000 heavily armed cavalry. This is a proper medieval war machine, the kind that usually steamrolls everything in its path. Now, let's look at what Robert the Bruce has to work with. His army numbers around 7,000 men less than half the English force. And get this, he's only got about 500 mounted troops, and they're not even proper cavalry. They're suitable for scouting and harassing the enemy, not for charging into battle. The bulk of his army is infantry armed with axes, swords, and pikes, with just a handful of archers. On paper, this looks like a massacre waiting to happen. On the morning of June 23rd, 1314, nobody's quite sure if there's even going to be a battle. The two armies are still 8 miles apart, which gives Robert time to make a crucial decision. Does he head north, or does he move west up the river into the hills? Robert's no fool. He knows that if he positions himself in the hills, Edward II will have to march through that area to reach Stirling Castle. And you know what? Edward takes the bait. The English king, desperate to rescue Stirling, pushes his troops mercilessly. They march 70 miles in 1 week. 70 miles, in medieval armor, in summer heat, carrying weapons and supplies. By the time they arrive, these poor sods are absolutely knackered, exhausted, hungry, and definitely not in peak fighting condition. Meanwhile, Robert's troops are relatively fresh, having chosen their ground carefully. When Edward learns the Scots are on the move, he pauses his advance and huddles with his advisors. They know the likely spots where the Scots might challenge them, and they start preparing their battle plans. On the Scottish side, Robert picks a flat field flanked by woodland called New Park. Brilliant choice. The trees provide cover and limit the effectiveness of English cavalry charges, which is their deadliest weapon. Robert organizes his infantry into formations called sealtrens, essentially tight squares, of men bristling with pikes pointing outward in every direction. It's like a medieval porcupine, virtually impossible for cavalry to crack. Thomas Randolph, the Earl of Moray, commands the vanguard. Robert himself takes charge of the rearguard. His brother Edward leads the 3rd Division, and Sir James Douglas on absolute hard case. This one commands the 4th Division in reserve. Sir Robert Keith has command of those 500 horsemen. Everything's set. Then the English make their first move. 2 cavalry formations advance ahead of the main army. The first is led by the Earl of Gloucester and the Earl of Hereford. Following behind, a smaller group of about 300 soldiers. They're marching toward the woodland, completely unaware of what's waiting for them. And here's where things get properly dramatic. Robert the Bruce, for reasons known only to himself, has ventured ahead of his main army, away from the protection of the woods. Henry de Bohun, the Earl of Hereford's nephew, spots Robert and realizes the Scottish king is isolated. This is his moment. If he can kill Robert, the entire Scottish resistance collapses. So Bohun charges forward in full combat gear, lance lowered, probably imagining the glory in the songs they'll sing about him. Robert sees him coming. Now, a sensible king would retreat to his army and let his guards deal with this threat. But Robert de Bruce isn't a sensible king. He's a certifiable badass. Instead of running, he spurs his horse forward to meet Bohun in single combat. Picture this. Bohun's on a massive war horse, fully armored, with a lance. Robert's on a smaller horse, Lis Armo Horde, armed with just about. It should be no contest. They charge at each other. At the last possible moment, Robert swerves aside, stands up in his stirrups, and brings his axe down on Bohana's head with such force that it cleaves straight through the helmet and splits his skull. The axe handle actually shatters from the impact. Bohan drops dead on the spot. Robert's guards rush forward, and the English forces under Gloucester and Hereford panic and retreat. Can you imagine the morale boost this gives the Scottish army? Their king just personally killed an English knight in single combat, like something out of an epic poem. But there is still that smaller English detachment, under Robert Clifford and Henry de Beaumont advancing on the other flank, completely unaware of what's just happened. Robert's nephew, Thomas Randall, hears that his uncle has repulsed one English advance and decides he needs to get in on the action. He marshes his division across open ground to meet this English detachment head-on. The two forces clash in brutal, close combat. The English cavalry, used to crushing infantry beneath their hooves, find themselves confronted with a wall of Scottish pikes. Horses rear and scream, riders are pulled from their saddles, and the English detachment is absolutely annihilated. Some flee to Stirling Castle, others back to the main English army, spreading panic and tales of Scottish ferocity as they go. That night, the English forces cross a stream called the Bannockburn and establish their position on the plain beyond it. They're cramped, uncomfortable, and increasingly demoralized. Then something interesting happens. A Scottish knight named Alexander Seton, who's been fighting for the English deserts, and rides over to the Scottish camp. He tells Robert that English morale is in the toilet and encourages him to attack in the morning. Robert listens carefully. This is intelligence gold. Come morning, the Scots advance towards the English position. Edward II is genuinely gobsmacked to see Scottish pikemen emerging from the cover of the woods and marching straight towards his army. As Robert's forces draw nearer, they pause and kneel in prayer. Edward, watching this, says, in surprise, they pray for mercy. One of his attendants replies, for mercy, yes, but from God, not you. These men will conquer or die. Chills. Right. Now, there's been some drama in the English camp. The Earl of Gloucester has been arguing with the Earl of Hereford over who should lead the vanguard. He's also tried to convince Edward to postpone the battle, let the troops rest and recover. Edward, feeling the pressure and perhaps questioning Gloucester's courage, essentially accuses him of cowardice. Stung by this accusation, Gloucester advances to meet the Scottish alone, with only a few men following him. It's a death wish, and everyone knows it. Sure enough, he reaches the Scottish lines, is quickly surrounded, and is killed almost immediately. After swatting aside this small force, the Scottish continued their advance on the main English army. The English knights charge forward to meet them. But here's the problem. Those Scottish pikes are absolutely devastating. The tightly packed formations keep the English cavalry at bay. Horses unable to penetrate the bristling wall of spear points. It's like trying to charge into a thorn bush, painful and pointless. The English commanders realize they need to change tactics. They attempt to deploy their longbowmen to flank the advancing Scots. If they can get into position, those archers will tear the Scottish formations apart with volley after volley of arrows. But Robert's prepared for this. He unleashes his 500 cavalry under Sir Robert Keith, and they charge straight into the English archers. The archers, unprotected by infantry, are decimated. Without their ranged support, the English army is in serious trouble. Edward II surveys the battlefield with growing concern. The Scots are fighting with a ferocity and discipline he hadn't anticipated. His larger army is being systematically dismantled by an inferior force through superior tactics and sheer determination. Then two of his advisors, Emerdy Valance and Giles, Dargentin supposedly the third best knight in all of Europe. Mind you, realize, the battle is lost. Their priority now is saving the king. They seize the reins of Edward's horse and literally drag him away from the battlefield, followed by 500 knights of the royal bodyguard. When the rest of the English army sees their king fleeing, the psychological impact is devastating. The army breaks. Panic spreads like wildfire, and suddenly it's every man for himself. The orderly battle becomes a chaotic rout. Once Edward and his guard are clear, Dargentin says something remarkable to the king. Sire, your protection was committed to me, but since you are safely on your way, I will bid you farewell. For never yet have I fled from a battle, nor will I now. He turns his horse around and charges back into the thick of the Scottish army, where he's overwhelmed and killed. That's proper medieval honor for you, Eben. In defeat, some men choose glory over survival. The casualties are staggering. About 10,000 English soldiers are killed in the battle, and during the retreat, Scotis, maybe 2,000 at most. It's an utterly lopsided victory that nobody saw coming. After the battle, only one sizable English group manages to escape back to England. Intact, a force of Welsh spearmen kept together by their commander, Sir Maurice de Berkeley. King Edward, pursued by James Douglas, flees to Dunbar Castle and takes a ship to Stirling Castle. That crucial fortress surrenders to Robert. Bothwell Castle, where several English nobles, including the Earl of Hereford, had taken refuge, also surrendered. The English position in Scotland has completely collapsed. The defeat at Bannockburn secured Scottish independence. England was eventually forced to formally recognize Robert de Bruce as the legitimate king of Scotland. One battle, against overwhelming odds, changed everything. It proved that tactics, terrain, and determination could overcome numerical superiority. It showed that leadership, real, inspiring leadership like Robert Chargin Bohan, or kneeling with his men in prayer, matters more than fancy titles or large armies. So, there you have it, the Battle of Bannockburn. The day a Scottish king with half an army defeated the largest English force ever sent into Scotland, secured his nation's independence, and became an immortal legend in the process. If you're as obsessed with these incredible historical moments as I am, smash that like button, and subscribe for more epic tales from the past. Seriously, history is packed with stories that put Hollywood blockbusters to shame. What other battles should I cover? Drop your suggestions in the comments. Until next time, remember, never underestimate the power of a well-placed pike and a king with nerves of steel. Cheers.